Hello everyone and welcome to this video, which is in our Great Engine Game series. I'm Grandmaster Matthew Sadler and we are taking a look at the TCEC, not yet the Super Final, which is ongoing as I speak, but a game that I really wanted to show you, which was Leela-Stockfish against Stockfish. Almost the last game of the TCEC Season 25 Division P playoff. It's a bit of a longer game, but it's a Leela win, and you know, beggars can't be choosers. So let's have a look at how it went. It was an absolutely stunning game and actually allowed Leela to win the mini-match within the Division P playoff against Stockfish 4.5, 3.5, which obviously once again gives the Leela fans hope for the Super Final. So how did the game proceed? It was quite unusual. D4, knight f6, c4, b6, f3, bishop b7, e4, and yeah, this system where you play a super accelerated Queen's Indian. I played it when I first came back from chess after a long break away, and scored quite well with it in actual fact. But this is quite an unpleasant little system, f3 and then e4. So the engines were more often than not taking the opportunity to go back into a King's Indian type structure. So bishop b3, bishop g7, queen d2, and it's just basically a slightly pardon me, a slightly weird sort of same-ish system. Funnily enough, these systems with b6 preparing c5 without losing a pawn, because obviously the bishop on e3 there is supporting the pawn on d4, so you can't just play c5 without material loss. These were played at some stage in the development of the King's Indian, not with such bad results, and they're still played occasionally nowadays. Maybe slightly unusual to play, to play it before castling and also to put the bishop on b7 so quickly, but it's not completely unknown. So a6 played, and now bishop e2 from Leela. Looks a little bit odd to put the bishop on there, but in actual fact Leela's just preparing to put the knight h3 to f2. Very common in the same-ish, and actually shows a weakness of having played bishop b7 on move 3. Normally black leaves a light squared bishop on c8 in these same-ish systems, just to keep covering the h3 square and to stop white from playing this maneuver. Because, in the same-ish type systems with the pawn on f3, the big problem is, what are you going to do with your knight? It can't go to the normal square f3. If you put it on e2, then it's blocking a bishop on f1. Yeah, this method of development, playing the bishop to e2 and knight h3 to f2, is the absolute ideal for white. So, yeah, I mean, that's already well, a slight disadvantage of black's unusual opening there. So castles played, knight h3, c5, and then d5. So yeah, pretty typical, same-ish as I said, but just with yeah, the bishop on b7, and obviously it's not great, that bishop. It's not looking at a particularly weak set of pawns there, so yeah, not really the best choice for black. But now something very, very interesting happened. Here Stockfish played the move b5, and yeah, I mean, in the reverse this was also Leela's choice, just playing b5. And the quite amazing thing from from my point of view is that neither Stockfish nor Leela, also not in my engine games, wanted to play c takes b5. Now, this is a Benko type structure, so but I mean, in principle this should be a very bad Benko for black, because normally in the Benko, white doesn't get to play to develop the bishop for free to e2. Something like bishop a6 takes f1 happens, and then the white king has to move, and that's always meant to be part of the compensation of black for giving away a pawn. The white's development is also made a little bit more tricky. Here white's development is absolutely perfect. Also, you've just played the bishop to b7, which you never do in the Benko. It normally goes to a6 as mentioned, attacking the knight on b5. Well, I mean, having played f3 and e4, just very easily like that, that's also a pretty nice system for white, because a lot of black's play in the Benko is also a little bit based on e4 being slightly vulnerable, and well, here it's not. So, you know, I mean, really everything should be in white's favour here, but the engines preferred not taking the pawn to taking this pawn, which I find quite striking. I mean, typically in engine chess, Benkos have not had amazing evaluations, even though the engines have actually scored quite well with black. You know, really holding a lot of draws in Benko type positions. So I don't know. Maybe the evaluations have caught up with reality somehow. But I thought it was quite striking. This was a typical game. This is knight a6, a4. Knight c7, castles, bishop a6. You can see that black's wasting a move here. Played bishop c8 to b7. Now playing bishop b7 to a6. Oh yeah, this was quite amazing. This was Dragon against Stockfish. And rook b8, b4. And Stockfish aimed for this position. And the most amazing thing about this is that, you know, as far as I'm concerned, white's just a clear pawn up. I mean, like, you know, this should be a technical win. And Stockfish is saying 0.6 and Dragon around the same. So actually this is just something I don't really understand at all. I mean, I understand that black's got some play, you know, and all of that, but yeah, surely you know, by any normal means and rights, you know, this position, a clear pawn up for white, you know, with no weaknesses, this should just be, you know, a win. Not an easy win, but a win, you know, just with a great deal of patience and you know, transposing to an endgame and then grinding. But okay, yeah, the engines thought that position was fine. So yeah, interesting. I don't, I'm not quite sure what to make of all of this. Avoiding a good Benko, and you know, those sort of evaluations of positions. Just a pawn down, as far as I can see, but it's supposed to be you know, only between slight and clear advantage for white. You know, not even a clear advantage. Yeah, stuff to think about, stuff to learn for me, I think. But yeah, just quite incredible. But yeah, both Leela and Stockfish played bishop h6. So the idea being, you know, you reduce the power of a Benko or a Benoni even by removing the dark squared bishop. You know, and just means that black doesn't get any counterplay here. So I mean, it really drains the life from black's position there. But yeah, but still, yes, it's not quite the same as a pawn somehow. So still waiting for the engine to do a Simagin and play bishop h8. Vladimir Simagin was a Russian player, 1950s and 60s, who was famous for giving up his rook like that for white's dark squared bishop. But e6 was played by Stockfish. And now quite an interesting moment. I mean, I was sort of thinking, well, could I actually just play d takes e6 here? And the idea is that if you go f takes e6, I take and go cb5, and this is a Blumenfeld type structure. If you know that opening, where you know, black gets these pawns and can play d6 to d5, but with the dark squared bishops exchanged, and also the king on g7, everything's a little bit loose. So if you go d5, I go knight f4, hitting e6. So I thought this would be very good, and indeed the engines are saying plus 1.3. But well, I had thought that this would probably be the problem, and it does turn out to be. The engines want to play the move b4 here. After let's have a look. How did that go? Sorry, it's gone in several different places there. Bishop g7, king takes g7, and then let me move to here. Then knight d5, f takes c6, takes, queen d6, knight c6, and then queen c5 was a double pawn sacrifice that the engines were trying out as black. But black's got lots of compensation. These things are quite well known from the same-ish, you know, knights on h3, bishop's not great on e2, and lots of dark squares and pressure there. So yeah, the engines were making this work. You know, Dragon was drawing this with black, Stockfish was drawing it with black. So yeah, you know, plenty of play there. So So yeah, so Leela simply took on g7 and played the move knight f2. And well, now we get a fairly big crossroads here. Leela as black played e takes d5, and in fact I think that in my engine games Stockfish did this an awful lot. Presumably it's one of those decisions that could go either way. I mean, in principle this is not such a bad modern Benoni for black. Dark squared bishops exchanged, it's true, but you do have already a6 and b5 in. Often white would play a4 to restrict that. So yeah, you've got a little bit of counterplay. I mean, it actually reminds me very much of a game in Game Changer, AlphaZero against Stockfish 8, where AlphaZero did this plan of swapping off the dark squared bishops and let black play a6 and b5 and then just try to undermine it later. So just to quickly show you how the Stockfish Leela game went, it was quite interesting. a4. I had a lot of games with rook fe1, and then especially Stockfish with black. Stockfish was playing c4, b3 takes, knight c5, b4 and a5, which is probably still a little bit better for white because you've got these this strong pawn chain, and this bishop is not great. But this bishop can come round maybe bishop a6 to b5, support a4. We've got knight d4 with white, should be slightly better. But yeah, I don't know. I mean, looked at a number of these positions in samish type positions, and black would love to have the dark squared bishop. That would probably give black an advantage. But yeah, even this one isn't too bad. There were a lot of draws. Dragon did beat Stockfish in one game, but yeah, still. It's feels sort of all right. So Stockfish played a4, and now b4, knight d1 and a5, knight e3, knight b6. And I mean, white does have this nice c4 square for a knight, but he's not going to get it 100% for free. And often, black can just also just sacrifice a pawn just to free up some space on the queen side. This was actually the Leela game, very interesting. Takes, f4, rook a7, queen c2, and rook e7. Nice plan from Leela, just preparing to bring the rooks in here to attack e4. And after rook d1, actually Leela just took and played f5. And it's one of those typical engine pawn sacrifice things that Leela just understands that this position for white is not so amazing. Hard to push this pawn through, and otherwise the king's just going to end up blockading. The rooks have got open files, got some rather awkward stuff to try and deal with. Doesn't really. Just a little bit tough here. This was the Stockfish Leela game, and Leela drew with consummate ease here. Rook c7, king g8, rook c5, knight d7, knight f6. A little bit of problems there. King g1, knight g4. Yeah, the black rooks are going to be incredibly active here. Knight e3 takes, rook b1, and I mean it was just about enough. It's never quite 100%. It would never be as easy for a human player as for Stockfish and Leela, but this was a agreed draw here in actual fact. So yeah, pretty but fairly convincing. It's just white definitely better, but plenty of counterplay for black. I do quite like that, to be honest. Stockfish played a much more risky move here, which is b4. And I mean, this is the big question now. I mean, it's most likely after you play b4 that you're going to play e5 after. And then it's the standard engine question. I mean, the queen side is fairly blocked. Have you got enough to force a decision on the king side, or can black make a draw? And well, the answer seems to be really it depends. In my Dragon Stockfish matches, some games were ending in white wins, quite a few games also in draws. So knight d1, a5 played. Black wants to get the pawn to a4, and then after a3 you can go b3, or b3 you can go a3. And just keep the queen side closed there. Knight e3, and now h5. Interesting choice there. Yeah, I mean, the black's trying to decide on what the best kingside structure is for eventually when black plays e5. Yeah, I mean, I was also getting quite a few games in my engine games with queen e7, g4, a4, h4, knight bd7, castles, a3, b3, king h8, and now e5. You know, and well, yeah, this is a little bit the question. You know, how much are we going to be able to do here as white? Well, in this game, this specific game, Stockfish managed to hold it quite beautifully as black against dragon. All the good moves being played there. h6 even, rook h7. Just this little Maginot line here just on the king's side. And in the end, I mean, you really have to go f4 here if you're going to do anything. But in the end, g5 was played by Stockfish. And after h5, well, you know, quite a bit more shuffling. But obviously, we all know that nothing is going to happen there. So, yeah, I mean, this is, you know, but there were also white wins as well. You know, it's kind of just not very clear, really, whether white can do this or not. I mean, actually, in the game too, h5 was played, h3, preparing g4 here. Rook e8, Stockfish kept the tension a little bit longer. Yeah, now Leela played a move I don't really understand. Rook d1. I mean, castle's queen side looks very reasonable. And, you know, bearing in mind that if black plays e5, then, well, in the game, you know, Leela got this position with the rook on d1 and then had to move the king over manually. Yeah, having it with castles already, you know, looks pretty good, really. I mean, I don't know whether Leela was afraid of these sort of positions with a king on the queen side, but it looks pretty reasonable. Stockfish was scoring pretty well here, really. g4 and king b1, you know, and g5, knight fg4, a4, knight c4, takes, bring the other knight round to e3, rook g4, knight c4, king a1, you know, it looks pretty nice for white here. Actually, yeah, what Stockfish did was quite nice. This move a3, and then check, and b takes a3. You're threatening rook b1 here. You know, it just all looked quite nice, really, for white. By the way, knight e2 allows queen f6. That's why we're able to do this. So yeah, I'm not quite sure why Leela played rook d1. It was a slightly strange move. Also, Leela was completely the only one who did it there. So bishop c8 was played by Stockfish. Yeah, if d6, you're going rook e6, and then you'll get knight c6, and possibly aiming for the d4 square. So the engines didn't particularly like that. So g4 was played, and now e5. Now h4 from Leela, just to stop black from going h4. White can keep, you know, these knights are well placed, g4 solid and e4 solid, so you can keep this tension for as long as you want. And knight bd7. And, well, I mean, it's pretty clear that if you want to put the white king anywhere, it should go on the queen side. So Leela played queen c1, looking to go king d2 to c2 to b1. There are other ideas. I mean, you could play rook c1 in order to play king there and there and there. But, well, Leela played queen c1. a4, king d2, queen a5. And now, very, very interesting moment. Because Leela played king c2 in this position. And Stockfish played the move b3 check. And actually, you know, in my engine games, Dragon couldn't resist. The funny thing is that, you know, after this move happened in my engine matches, you know, white was suddenly winning a vastly greater proportion of games than in, you know, the positions before, you know, like this. So, and it's a very interesting question, really, and you know, it comes back to the question of, does white have enough in this position if the queen side doesn't get opened, if the queen side remains closed? And, well, it seems to me, you know, judging from the results of the games, obviously that's not always a great thing just to judge by the results, but, you know, just in general, it's an indicator. It seems that black's chances of drawing are probably better than white's of winning, although, yeah, you know, it can't be too easy because there are some white wins happening. But, you know, once the queen side gets opened, that just gives white, in principle, that gives white an extra avenue. Of course, black can get counterplay there. But in the long run, the superior side, and that's white, is going to be able to make more of the queen side than the inferior side, which is black. So actually, in some sort of higher sense, really, this move king c2 really won the game for Leela, because it tempted Stockfish to play b3 check, king b1, b takes a2, king a1. You could take on a2 as well, but king a1 is pretty typical. We all know that theme. Use your opponent's pawns to shield your own king. And after this, then suddenly, Leela really started making progress. And in my engine matches, you really saw both Dragon and Stockfish winning games. Whereas, they never considered this plan of going king c1 or even going king d2, king c2, So it's interesting. It's really interesting. It's just one of those things that you think, maybe in future iterations of engines, when they get stronger and stronger, that they'll be able to give us some definitive answer on this. But my feeling is that b3 check in principle is a mistake. I don't think that black's lost in the other position. I think that black can probably just about hold the position. But after this one, I'm sort of suspecting that white's probably winning in the long run. So king a1 played, a3 from Stockfish, and now b3, rook a7. And now we get a nice period of play, nice for Leela fans, where Leela just maneuvers its pieces all over the place. Basically, what Leela wants needs to make the queen side secure, so in particular this b3 pawn. You're going to play g5 at some stage, and then your break is basically going to be f4 at some stage. And Leela's just shuffling with the pieces, just trying to get into a good way of doing that. There also is there's a very interesting thing that what you could also do is take this pawn on a2 and then line up on the pawn on a3 and just attack it with a couple of knights. Knights on maybe b1 and c2, for example. So that's also a plan, and Leela's also keeps that in reserve as well. And somehow, Stockfish really feels the need to try and create counterplay on the queen side, to try and exploit some of the inroads that it's made. And this possibly also leads to a bit of a worsening of Stockfish's position there. So knight f1 played. Rook b7, rook d3. So the rook gets a nice position on the third rank. Talked about this in the Silicon Road to Chess Improvement. The rook on the third rank, excellent, often defensive and attacking piece. That rook will come in handy eventually when we go f4. Knight b6, rook c3. Slightly mysterious move. I'm not sure whether it was really necessary, because it sort of tempted Stockfish to play knight a4. Obviously, b takes a4 allows rook b1 check, but now rook e3 and bishop d7. Seems to me that white's just lost a tempo there. I'm not quite sure why you'd want to do that, but it doesn't really matter at all. g5 played, knight h7 and knight d2. So just supporting the pawn on b3 there. f6 played by Stockfish, and again, an interesting question as to whether black should really be helping white by doing this. But if you don't do anything at all, I'm going to start playing king a2 and just sort of manoeuvring. There was let's just show you a game, something that happened. Do I have a good one there? Just having a quick look at what I'd made a note of. This looks quite nice. So knight b2, king takes a2, rook a8, queen c3, just offering the exchange of queens, queen b4, f4, takes, ef, rook f3, and we're just going to take the pawn on f4. We'll maybe sort out e5, or maybe start lining up on this pawn on a3. Lots of possibilities again, and black, again rather restricted. That's possible, but somehow you do wonder though whether you know, somehow trying to wait a little bit is better, because, you know, this is also just helping white somehow. I mean, I call this pawn structure on the king side the stockfish structure. We've seen it many times in check Benoni types positions, which this is really, with these pawns on c5, d6 and e5. And well, the number of positions that stockfish has won, you know, just turning round and round and round, the evaluation goes higher and higher and higher, and then eventually at some stage stockfish does something like breaking f4. So yeah, you know, in principle this is quite a tricky little structure for black. But again, you know, white's just achieving this with little worries if black just goes f6 so quickly. So knight g8, knight d1, knight b2, and knight c3. So Leela ignored not taking this pawn. It would have been possible to take it, but it's much nicer to. The problem is that if you take this this pawn on this knight on b2 like this, actually the engines consider the position to be about equal then. But you know, it's much harder to get a grip of this pawn rather than the pawn on a3. So what you really want to do, you want to take the pawn on a2 and then line up on the pawn on a3. And well, now a knight's on b2. If the pawn on a3 falls, you've got a knight on b2 as well. So Leela just plays knight c3 and sidesteps that. Quite striking, you know. You've got all these pieces, and actually all that it's doing is blocking black's attack along the a and the b file, and also, you know, giving a potential worry of the knight on b2. Rook a7, king takes a2, rook f8, knight cb1. So having a nice little look at that pawn, just keeping black a little bit honest. And well, just actually if the queen moves away, you can just take on a3, and then you're ready to support the other knight on a3 with knight b1. So that's yeah, another point to how Leela's been moving the knights, just keeping those knights linked. Capablanca linked knights, I've mentioned this a number of times in other videos. You know, keeping the knights moving together all through the board, so that one performs a function and the other one can take its place when it moves on. This is working out very nicely here. King h7, rook c3, knight h6, and knight f1. Why are we doing this? Well, actually Leela's sort of thinking about getting the queen out to g5 maybe, or even just e3 and then trying to get an f4. So knight f7, queen e3, knight h8 from Stockfish, quite a move. But the idea is to be able to defend g6 and also keep the rook on here to stop rook f4. But after queen g5 here, yeah, Stockfish got a little bit desperate. Presumably started calculating and seeing that things were going to go wrong in the end. I mean, I played out a game. This is Dragon against Stockfish, and it was quite nice to see how it all went. Knight a4, rook c1, knight b2. Dragon just ignoring the knight, not opening up the b file or anything. And now knight f5 from Dragon. This was a very nice pawn sacrifice. Takes, queen e3. What's the idea? Well, the idea is knight d2. We're coming into e4, attacking d6, threatening knight g5. So queen h4 played, double pawn sacrifice from Dragon. Really nice. Rook g2, queen f4, queen c3. No exchange of queens with two pawns down, but this rook is heading over to g1 there. So really pinning that knight down. I mean, you have a look at the knights. They're yeah. I mean, this one's performing a useful function, but this one's completely out of play as well, really. So rook f8, rook g3, rook f5, queen c2. Just a little bit of shuffling there, and then b4 from Dragon. Yet another pawn sacrifice. The idea is takes. We play c5, and we're just breaking through. And well, these rooks and queens are also completely uncoordinated. So queen e3, b5. Just chasing the rook away. If you go rook b6, of course, well, I'm just going to probably just exchange off queens and then come and grab this pawn and then grab this knight. So, yeah, can't do much about that. So rook a8 to keep hold of the a pawn, but then knight d6. Queen b3, looking to exchange off queens b6, b7. And, yeah, I mean, black was just in all sorts of problems. I mean, king a3, for a start, is a very big threat. So that was quite nice. I mean, you can just see that, yeah, there are threats on the king side, you know, even if black's played this knight h8 move and all that, there are ways that that white can make further inroads, and the fact that yeah, all the pieces are not coordinating well for black means that pawn sacrifice is opening up fresh lines. Very, very dangerous. So knight a4 was played by Stockfish, and here Leela decided to grab the piece. Rook b8, rook takes a3, bishop a4, and queen c1. And yeah, this is pretty nice actually. Black's definitely got some play, but it's just not that easy really. Check there, queen b6 was an idea. Rook ba8, that doesn't look bad, but what white simply does is, I'll just show a couple more moves there. Queen b2, rook e1, is that these knights on d2 and b1, this is the key defensive structure, because you take, and then after queen a7 you go knight db1. Okay, the knights are not super, they're not, you know, they're a little bit far away from the action, but at some stage you'll unravel yourself, get your king out of the way, and then you'll be able to play knight b5, attacking d6, the other knight come to c3, and then everything's absolutely fine. But yeah, I mean, basically black is just short of enough counterplay there. King a1, rook a5, knight e3, bishop b3 played, hoping to get something like rook a8 in. So takes, queen a3, queen d8, and now this very brave move, bishop to c, king to b2 rather. It's rather key actually, because obviously black was threatening rook a8, which is rather annoying. But after king b2, you'd think bishop c4, king c1, and bishop takes c2. But here actually queen a7 check is really strong, because king h8 and 6 I've got knight f5 check, and then queen g7 checkmate. And king g8, I've got knight f5 as well. And, well, I'm threatening queen g7 checkmate. If knight f7, I'll just go rook g6. And if you go queen f8, I go knight e7, king h7, knight c6, discovered check, picking up the rook there. So black can't do that. So what black has to do is to go bishop a2 check, takes from rook a8. But that's cost black an extra piece, of course. So white's now going to have rook, bishop and knight for the queen, and that is in principle a winning advantage. Yeah, I mean, normally I'd sort of yawn and say end white won, but the way that Leela did it was absolutely beautiful again, I have to say. It was really lovely. Maybe a little unnecessary, you might say, but very nice. The first thing to do is just to keep hold of white really there and stop black from doing anything. I mean, Stockfish here trying to make some sort of inroads, but not really succeeding. And now this bishop comes to h3, ready to come into e6 at some stage. Queen f8, knight e1, knight d8, knight d2. We're starting to get our pieces organised here. And now queen e7 from Stockfish, and well, this is something that you might want to maybe stop the video, have a little look, because what Leela did here was really nice. It was really cool. None of the other engines do it. All the other engines play the boring move knight g2, and then you know, gradually come in, get the rook over here, and start coming in. But Leela played the move f4, which is really nice. So the idea is that, you know, if e takes f4, we go knight to f3, and we've got a great square for the knight, just defending the pawn in h4, threatening knight g5, and also threatening some e5 later. So queen takes h4, and then this is another Leela special as well. Yeah, I mean, both Dragon and Stockfish, they also jump up to +5, you know, when you play f4, but they all want to play it like this, which is perfectly fine. This is also very strong. But Leela plays f5, which is very artistic. A little bit risky, but very artistic. So queen g3 check played, knight f3, g5, and it looks, you know, I was just playing through this game, I was saying, oh, what's happening? Why is Leela so happy? Because, you know, it's looking quite dangerous, g4 and stuff like that. But rook g1 is the idea. Queen takes h3, and you're thinking, you're crazy, right? You've missed that knight g5 is illegal because the knight's pinned. That's definitely what would happen to a human player. But actually, Leela's assessed that rook takes g5, that this is completely winning for white. Quite amazing, and the key point is knight f7, and then this move king e2, which is really gorgeous. And I mean, actually, the black queen doesn't have many squares to escape to. If queen h1, I can always go rook g1, and I can also play moves like knight f1, to really keep the queen bottled in. And in the meantime, black's got stuff like rook g6 and f6 and all this stuff. So actually, this position seems to be just completely winning for white. But I can barely believe it, really. I mean, that's the thing. So knight h6 was played, and now f6 from Leela, looking for well, rook g7 check, knight g5. That's one big threat. If you go something like knight g4, I think f7 was the move that was winning. When you're just queening, nothing you can do about it. Quite amazing. So king h8, and now the move rook g6, threatening rook takes h6. Again, if the knight moves, we just go f7 and queen. So king h7, and now knight g5 check would have just won, of course. It's going to take a little while, but this will be winning in the end. But Leela preferred rook g7 and knight g5. And, well, I mean, we're attacking the queen and we're just threatening rook h7 takes h6. That's simple as it gets. And obviously, if the knight were to move away, then knight f7 will be checkmate. So queen h2 check, king d1, queen f4, rook g6. And, the knight prevents king h7 there, which is, really cool as well. So queen f2 played by Stockfish, but now the writing's on the wall. King c2, very nice move, keep everything safe. h4, f7 check, rook d6. And, well, this is all just completely clear. Rook g8, knight f3. We've got f8 queen as well that just wins. And Leela won in another 10 moves. There we are. That was a slightly longer game there, but well, I hope you enjoyed it all the same. I thought there were, so many amazing little things there to look at. I mean, starting from the very opening, actually, the decision of both Leela and Stockfish not to take on Abenko, but just to swap off the dark squared bishops. Drain a little bit of life from Black's position instead of taking the gambit. I thought that was. Yeah, very surprising indeed, and I'm not quite sure what to think about it, really. And then, yeah, this whole thing about, playing e takes d5 or not, very interesting, and, the whole idea about whether, in this position, when black plays e5, whether black has enough defensive possibilities just to hold the king side, or whether white can make something of the position just playing on the king side. But yeah, and then this fascinating little moment where, Leela's play, you'd almost say that Leela's been inaccurate, but actually it feels like Leela just sort of tempted out this move b3. And after that, it suddenly seems that, okay, white's not only got the king side, but also plenty of possibilities on the queen side as well. And, well, for me, in any case, from the results of the games, both Stockfish and Dragon were really making big scores from this moment on, whereas before, with everything closed, a lot of positions were just ending up locked, as I showed you, with h6 and g5. So that's a very, very interesting moment. And, well, of course, Leela's shuffling, moving the knights around, very, very nice. Well, that's what Leela does best. But I thought that the end was particularly attractive, particularly artistic, this move f4 and then f5, with the idea simply of giving back the piece and assessing that this is winning, starting with this move king e2, because knight g5, obviously knight g5 check, just outstanding, really amazing. I wouldn't, I'd have to stumble into this by mistake. I couldn't. I don't think it would ever occur to me that, to do anything like this at all. So there we are. Very nice game from Leela. 4.5, 3.5 win in the little mini match. Currently, I think Stockfish 2 points ahead. So, yeah. kind of business as usual, but who knows what Jeroen has got up his sleeve, and who knows what Leela can do with that. But it's a very nice match anyway, full of classic games that Jeroen has found and sort of tweaked for the TCEC Super Final. So there we are. Hope you enjoyed that, and do keep your eyes peeled on the channel, because we've got lots more engine games, a few more Torch Leela games, and a few more from Division P Playoff, because there were quite a few lovely games there, and already starting to have a look at the Sufi games as well. So there we are. Thanks very much for watching.